So I'm not going to tell you my whole story, and I told a little bit more last time, but if you want to know more, you can find me talking on the internet. I've been involved with a bunch of things that are related to the topics I'm sure you talked about all day. Automating computers, make them do things. Been part of a bunch of open source projects, Puppet, OpenStack, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes. Worked on a book for O'Reilly about web operations, and I've been part of DevOpsDays happening around the world for about 10 years. There's a 10-year anniversary coming up in Ghent in about a month, so that should be fun. And right now I work for Pivotal, which just got bought by VMware. So soon I'll work for VMware. That's enough about that. This is the most important slide. This is my Twitter handle and the logo that I made for myself. So if you want to get my attention, you should send me a DM on Twitter, and as Serhat can attest, I will respond to you within days. If you send me a LinkedIn invite, I'll respond to you within months. But yeah. I live in the desert where there's big cactus, and if you want to come visit me, this is right by my house. We can go walk around in the cactus and talk about Kubernetes or whatever. Also, and these were slides I basically showed last year. I come in various configurations of hair and beard. So you might see me, I look different than I did last year. I have a different configuration. I'm also getting more gray hairs, but we'll pretend like that's not happening. So working backwards, like I said, the first half is going to be a bit of a review. We're going to talk about some things that I talked about last time. So as you recall, last time I talked about Yenicheri, and in particular, the dynamic that developed in the late stages of the empire, where the Yenicheri had basically so much political power, and that they were actively preventing the modernization of Turkey. Right? And there's some parallels to things that happen in operations and system administration. And they could basically stop things from happening. They could say no to the Sultan or whatever. But I didn't finish that story, and if you are Turkish, I assume you know some of your history. The story ends very badly for the Yenicheri, and a group shows up with some better tools and better processes who happen to be also probably better aligned with the organization. So that's sort of the end of that story. And then this is the last thing I said to you last year. I had a call to action, and I'm gonna go through this and some of the other things I said last year, so I can set up what I'm going to say this year. Right? So last year I told you to be smart. Did anyone take that advice? Be inspired. Harder. Work together. It's probably the hardest. And then, to make a point, my trick is basically to repeat the same thing over and over. So I told you to change your behavior if you were here last year. Change your behavior, right? I also made this point, or I hope I made this point, is that you haven't learned anything until you've changed your behavior. Right? And I think that it's really easy to see this in music or sports, games, where if you're getting better, if you're learning, you could play a harder song, or you can win a better player. That's what learning means, is you got better. If you didn't change your behavior, you just collected the words. You just collected the trivia. And I asserted last year, and also this related to the call to action, that smart, inspired people working together is the best methodology for delivering software. For doing anything, actually, but definitely for software. And I also gave you my definition, which I think is the best definition of DevOps, which is it's optimizing human performance and experience operating software, dun dun dun, with software, and with humans, right? The next slide is a very important slide, and really, I'm going to make whenever you hear digital transformation, what I want you to imagine is pandas vomiting rainbows, and someone going, because that's about as useless as it is, those words. I told you last year, principles are more important than practice, more important than tools. In a lot of what I'll consider like the failures of DevOps, it's because we get very, very focused on the concrete implementation of tools, and sometimes we forget about the principles, and that's one convenient, but also it's also easier, right? And I'm going to get, hopefully by the end of this, a little bit more reason why. I think that mindset's more important than skill set, more important than your tool set. I think adapting is more important than adopting. And then this is sort of the basis for the rest of this talk. I said why is more important than what. And I think that warrants a little explanation. So first I'm going to talk about what. So this is what you really want. When people say they want DevOps, this is what they really, really want. And this is also a review from last year, if you remember. Here's what you really want. You want scalability, you want availability, you want reliability, you want operability, usability, observability, probably some more ilities and itities. You want it all for free without changing anything. That's what you really want, let's be honest. And then just to make that point, we'll make it big without changing anything. So does anyone see the problem? We want things to be better, but we don't want to change. And I already told you, change your behavior. Change your behavior. So this is also a review. Very famous quote from a person hopefully you don't work with. I don't have time to learn new things because I'm too busy getting things done. The least productive person in the universe. And I also made this point last time that the majority across the industry, they just change the words. And I'm going to come back to why that happens towards the end. But this is true. This is what we see. It's like, okay, we're going to change the words to DevOps. Now we're going to call them DevOps engineers. We're not going to do anything different. Hopefully you got a raise. And then now the new one is we're going to change all the words to SRE. But don't change anything else. Just change the words. So why does this happen? So that's sort of the end of the review, and now it's time for a little bit of a test. So anyone who was here last year, and really all of you from whatever you've seen today, what did you change from last year? What are you going to change? What are you going to do different tomorrow from what you saw today? And this, I gave you homework last time, and I know at least one person did the homework. What are your service level objectives? I warned you last year I would come back and ask you, what are your service level objectives? Who even knows what service level objectives are? Anyone? Like, few people? Anyone who watched me last year that can answer that question? See me after class? So the homework that you didn't do last year that you have to do now is to go read these chapters from the SRE book, which was mentioned by the speaker who was just on stage. So the SRE book is essentially the Google implementation of DevOps, and I believe that these principles chapters they're like pure gold, right? And you should read these chapters. Embracing risk, service level objectives, eliminating toil. I feel like the DevOps community is doing itself a disservice if it doesn't at least have this vocabulary to talk about some of these topics, right? You can read this book for free. There's a URL. Just Google SRE book, and you can read it all for free. So I asked you this a moment ago. What did you change? And for those of you who weren't here last year, what will you change? But now, and even more important is, why did you change? Or why didn't you change? Right? Because you came, you spent a day, you heard all these speakers. What did you do different? Why? Why? It's more important than what. But here's the deal. Here's the challenge. Everyone has a different why. Everyone involved in your organization, everyone in this room has different why, like more than one why, different levels of why. So why are you here today? To DevOps all the microservices? Yeah. Why do we do anything? Why do humans do anything? To deliver software? Is that really why we're alive? Do it faster? Deliver software safer, right? I mean, sure, why not? Maybe. But what do you really need? What do you need to do anything? It turns out people have thought about this problem before. Right? So this is a modification of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And assuming that you get the bottom levels solved, then you can start to work on higher ones. And we all have different levels of this, right? So I'm assuming we're all alive and that most of our physiological needs are met. We're breathing. Most of us had a decent lunch, right? So that's solved. We're relatively safe. We're relatively safe in a pretty privileged place to come to this fantastic venue and listen to these speakers talk about their ideas. That's nice. And then there's the social needs, right? So we have obligations to our parents, maybe, our children, right? Does anyone have children? I have 3 children. It's a lot of work. But I feel like I should do things because of this social fabric I'm embedded in. And lots of things that you do for, quote unquote, your work. It's called work because it sucks, right? Is so you can take care of these other obligations, so you can take care of these other needs. And then there's all these other higher level things, like what's our esteem? Like how do we feel about ourselves? What are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? And we all have these needs. And what you come to understand, or what I've understood from watching people try to change for the last 10 years, is that behaviors adapt to meet needs. Right? So you could tell people to change, but they're not going to change because they don't need to. Right? I'm going to make that point over and over. So we all have needs as an individual, and we also have needs as an organization. So everyone is listening to me speak in English, and I assume the majority of you were not raised speaking English as your first language, right? Your native language. So this is something that is interesting to me, because when you talk about DevOps and communication and like the different tribes inside of an organization, there's often language barrier. Even if everyone speaks the same language, the language of the sysadmins is maybe different than the language of the developers. And even like subgroups of developers have different things. So this research, and there's a TED Talk, and if you search for like 6 months, learn a new language, you'll probably find this guy's TED Talk. Research shows that a normal human adult can be fluent in a new language in 6 months, and a native level speaker in 2 years. So there's a bunch of things about what it takes to get there, like what the preconditions are to do that, but a lot of it comes back to need. And I think it's also worth pointing out when you make a statement like this, when organizations say things like, "Oh, we can't hire the right people, we don't have the talent." It's like a normal human adult should be able to be an expert in pretty much any technology within like 3 to 6 months, like full stop. So it sort of makes me mad. Anyway. So most of us will not be fluent in a language within 6 months. And why? Why won't we be fluent? We know it's possible. The research exists. There's people that have done this. They've become fluent in languages in 6 months, creating these conditions. And the reason most of us won't become fluent in a language in 6 months is because we don't need to. Right? This is why lazy Americans like myself don't speak a bunch of languages, because everywhere in the world, most of the signs are literally in English. And most of the time, they're people that are speaking English. So the things that I need are already solved. So for me to learn a new language, like I have to manufacture a motivation. I have to make myself need that to the level that I want to accomplish it, right? So we only learn anything to the level that meets our needs, right? This is the research that goes back to, and you can go watch that TED Talk, is basically you will learn the language to the level that you need to learn the language. When you were a child, you were learning the language because you needed to get food. You needed to get attention. You needed to get all these things. And you stop learning the language at the level that you need. And I think this is also true of tech, also true of programming languages, true of anything. You have a problem that needs to be solved. You'll learn enough of that language, enough of that technology to solve that problem, and then you'll have another problem, and you'll stop learning that, and you'll go learn something else, right? Sometimes your problem is you're like super bored in this repetitive thing, but that's like totally different. So we'll only learn anything to the level that meets our why. But not all of us have the same why, and not all why are the same. So I kind of talked about that a minute ago, but I'm going to take it a little deeper. So this is a super fast, superficial introduction to some ideas from Simon Wardley. He does some interesting tools for strategy, and there's a bunch of stuff around Wardley mapping, and there's a conference actually next month I'm going to speak at about Wardley mapping. But this is a condensed version of Sun Tzu. Does anyone know who Sun Tzu is? Sun Tzu, he's a Chinese like war philosopher, strategy. So he wrote this book called The Art of War. And he talks about a bunch of things in I don't speak Chinese either, but it's been translated to English, so we could take advantage of it. So Simon boils down this into this, at least for the purpose of today's talk, this notion of the why of purpose and the why of movement. So you have this high-level purpose, which is, we'll take an example of chess. The purpose is to win, right? And then the rest of that cycle, the rest of that circle, is kind of looking at the board and understanding what the pieces are and where they are positioned relative to each other and making a decision about the move. So the why of purpose is the highest level to win the game, but the why of movement is tactical and looking at the board, making the decision. I'm going to move this knight, I'm going to move this rook, I'm going to move this pawn because it creates this opportunity, it defends this vulnerability. Right? And so these are different levels of why. So this is an abstracted org chart. So these are, we'll say, the three, presidents, vice presidents, whatever. And they have a bunch of managers. And then down here, people do actual work, right? And then each one of these people has a different why. So at the top level why, someone's trying to get a bonus, and they're trying to grow their org, and they're trying to get their budgets, whatever. In the middle is always the biggest problem, but they're trying to play politics on both sides. At the bottom, someone's trying to figure out, should we use Kubernetes, right? And all of these whys have like some local optimization for that person. And when you think about the DevOps context, and this has already come up in some of the talks, and I've given these same talks where my why as a developer who gets incentivized to create features is different than my why as an operator who is rewarded for stability. And in fact, those whys are in opposition to each other, right? And to me, what DevOps actually represents as a system thinking is getting everyone involved to connect to the higher why, the why of purpose at the highest level. Because each of us will have a why for the game we're going to play at our level, but are we connecting to that higher why? And I feel like this is the opportunity in an organization. So that's a lot of whys, and then at some point people have to actually do work. So all that has to translate into what's. And this is the hard part of our game, of our work, right? So you want to change behaviors by connecting whys to what's. But like it's whys all over the place and what's all over the place, and like no one can keep track of anything, and everyone hates each other, right? Who works there? Anyone? No? All right. So these are another abstraction of kind of personas, right? So in an organization, the developers, the operators, the business, security, there's other things that you could put into this, but this is a simplified model for the purpose of this discussion. Each of these personas, each of these personalities has a different why of movement, right? So they also have a why of purpose, which might be to feed their kids, right? Or to make their parents proud. Anyone trying to make their parents proud still? No, just kidding. You don't have to raise your hands. So these developers, operators, business, security people have a different why of movement, and they're making decisions, tactical decisions, to do a thing, right? We're going to implement whatever. We're going to implement some technology. The game, the goal, is to connect these groups of people with their different understanding and different why of purpose to the higher why, and then the magic happens, right? The pandas vomiting rainbows. That's what we're here for. But there's a little problem. And this is related to why we don't change our behavior. So this is a quote from, this is an American author. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it. Right? And I'm sure some of you have this conversation when you're trying to explain DevOps or whatever. And the problem is that the person is already, their needs are met. Right? Like they get paid, they get a need met by not changing. So why would you change to something that is uncertain and may not meet a need when you're already meeting this need? And another problem, a related problem, especially when you start talking about changing the tools and processes, is that human beings attach their identity to their task. Right? And in the Western cultures, it's like our last names are literally the jobs that our great-great-grandparents had, right? Like my last name is SHAFER, which is German for shepherd. So probably somewhere a long time ago, someone was tending sheep. And that was like the way that these families, right? And Smith or whatever is like the job. So we attach our identity to our task. And then there's an aspect of it when you tell someone they're going to change, that they feel like their identity is attacked. Like you're erasing who they are when you tell them they're going to do a new thing. And I don't know if anyone's experienced this firsthand, but they'll fight you. They don't want to change because we like it how we are. So this is another American quote. So this is a very famous and very successful investor. He's worth billions of dollars, and he talks about, he's been investing for decades, and he watches all these cycles and bets money, basically. And he says everything follows these 3 I's. Every innovation, it starts with the innovators, and then the imitators, and then last, and in some sense the least, idiots. Right? Innovators, imitators, idiots. Predictably every single time. So last time I showed this curve, and some of you might be familiar with this technology adoption lifecycle crossing the chasm model. And I used to get very, very frustrated with this, although I've come to accept it and understand it. So the motivation, the why, for the early adopters and innovators is to actually seek an advantage. The motivation is getting an advantage. And as a consequence of seeking an advantage, they actually get an advantage. And that legitimizes the practice or the tool or the technology. Now, once it's legitimized, what happens? It becomes a word that people hear as legitimate, and the later adoption cycle is actually driven by groups that are seeking not an advantage, but legitimacy, right? So I'll ask you personally, which do you think is a better motivation? Which do you think is a better why? I also think this explains why people only change the words. This explains why you get the buzzword bingo word salad projects, right? We're gonna continuously DevOps, microserverless, machine learning, IoT, blockchain. Like that's someone make a joke about that in an earlier presentation. And I've been in that same meeting like more than once. And you're like, you don't actually know what any of these words mean, but you're just saying them because you heard someone else got some result with them. Someone else legitimized these words. They don't mean anything to you. You don't have a real why connected to them other than you want to say them because you thought some other cool people said them before. So most people just change words. I kind of want to do an hour-long talk about using words wrong for fun and profit, but that's a different talk. So when you're looking at this and making decisions about what you're going to do differently, I'm going to draw this back to me. This is why I brought up my friend Warren Buffett. I feel like obviously the innovators are innovators because it's like labeled innovators in the curve. And then you have the imitators. And then, yeah. And I'm going to say it's okay to be an imitator. Like, you don't have to innovate on anything. And in some ways, the Wardley map strategy exercise is to identify where you don't have to be an innovator, that you can be an imitator so that you can focus on strategic innovation where you're getting differentiated value for your organization. It's okay to be an imitator, but please, for your own sake, don't be an idiot, right? So right now, we live in a very blessed time. We have access to an incredible amount of information. The internet mostly works, although for some reason I couldn't get on Wikipedia from Turkey. I don't know. Whatever. So that's mostly true. We have access to. But GitHub works, and you can get on Twitter, and you can do all these things, right? So we can see the same what, right? Like, everyone in the world right now is able to get access to essentially the same technology. So the question is, why? Like, what are you going to do with it? Is it dependent on why, which is dependent on what you need. So the transformation is only happening, this is as an individual or as an organization, only going to happen to the level that it meets a need. You're only going to change, you're only going to learn Kubernetes, you're only going to be able to speak English, you're only going to be able to speak, hopefully, somebody Turkish, to the level that you need, right? Transformation will stop when the why runs out. So last year I said, smart, inspired people working together is the best methodology. Now I'm going to say, smart, inspired people connecting why together. Connecting their purpose together is the best methodology. So the data's in. This is just a quick reference, and something also you have access to. It's the State of DevOps report. This is a screenshot from 2018. The 2019 one came out recently. I haven't had a chance to digest it. But it's basically showing that the elite performers are both faster and safer, right? They deploy more often, and they deploy faster, and they have less incidents, and when they do have incidents, they recover thousands of times faster, right? So this is out. So this is advice for me. Telling people to change behaviors does not help them. Behaviors only change in response to unmet need. So, what do you need? Why not? Why not change? So, thank you very much. Hopefully I didn't disappoint you. And I believe that was my time. I would talk longer if give me more time.
Do we have any questions on SiliConf? No? Oh, okay, we have one. What are advantages of pigs?
Next question.
When compared to OpenShift? No?
So that is an epic troll, whoever that is. Congratulations. I mean, right now they're both giving you like Kubernetes in your data center. So. I'll take it offline if you want to talk in the hall.
Yeah. Okay. So, any other question? This is your chance, last chance. This is the last call.
Who's going to do anything different tomorrow? You just got to come spend a day, 2 days.
So how do you show someone that he needs something? Like, how do you prove that it's need?
I think that the answer is complicated in the sense that you have to understand that person's context. Yeah. And this gets into this deep psychology of how humans respond to feedback. And certain people respond to constructive criticism, and other people really respond to encouragement. And so I think it's hard to give you an A, B, C, connect the dots answer to a question that is really, really dependent on that particular individual's circumstance and that particular individual's relationship. So there's a bunch of questions about what their motivations are and what they actually need, and then there's a bunch of questions about their personality and also the power dynamics between the person. So if you come to someone as a peer, then that's a very different conversation if you come to someone as their boss or their subordinate, right? So I think that there's a very complicated set of things you want to think about when you're trying to change people.
Thank you.
I guess that's all. Thank you very much, Andrew. I mean, whenever you're here, the closing keynote is yours.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll change your behaviors. Don't do it for me. Do it for yourself. Thank you.